everybody, I'm Katallina, and today we are talking about episode 3 of Unnamed Memory. As we get started, the first thing I'll have to say is this: excuse me while I pick my jaw up off my desk, because this episode had some absolutely crazy moments that took me for a total loop, and I was absolutely amazed at some of them, and we're definitely going to be discussing them today. Let's get started by talking about the Witch of the Forest, who had a very interesting introduction and who had some very interesting situations happen with and surrounding her throughout the episode. First thing I have to say about this woman is, oh my gosh, this woman is batshit crazy. We know she's batshit crazy from the instant we meet her because, she ends up bringing our guys back and telling them stuff about Tinasha. She knows stuff about Tinasha. There is almost a conflict as they go and get ready to leave. And you can tell that something weird has gone on during the time that Oscar spends with her, especially while Lazar is still dozing on the couch because of the poison. The theory that she is definitely nuts is definitely further accentuated by the fact of what she has done when Tinasha comes back to confront her about the curse. The curse itself, that by itself was crazy enough. But when Tinasha comes back and confronts her about it, and then she's like, oh, I'm just trying to help you, dude. And she ends up giving Tinasha samples of Oscar's blood and his sperm. I was like, what the hell is going on here? That is so messed up on so many levels. If you think about the fact that witches in this world have powers where they can put the kind of curses that Oscar has experienced, both through the Witch of Silence and now through the Witch of the Forest, on him. And then you add to it the fact that witches obviously lack social norms and morals because their power puts them above the necessity for such things. The people of this world have a rightful reason to be afraid of them and to not want to interact with them and to not want them near them for a variety of reasons. I can't think of a lot of good reasons that you would really want to have one of these people around, because while there might be some benefits if they were able to help you with some magic or something, there's just too much risk of consequence for a normal person to tolerate that for any length of time. It just doesn't make sense from a self-preservation standpoint. Next on the oh my gosh train, we have to talk about Mr. Hot but obviously evil that comes in early in the episode. It was interesting to see that we were cutting away from the main cast and that we were actually going to see that guy and the girl who have been traveling around and who seem to be up to something, but we don't entirely understand what. And for a while there, I thought that they were going to actually be a antagonistic force within the series, and I really wondered what we were going to see from them, but it seems to me like either I had my thoughts and theories misplaced, or that something has happened where a smaller fish has now been consumed by a bigger fish, because this mage of some form with the silver hair and the interestingly colored apple green eyes shows up, and he's doing his thing, and he's talking about how he knows Tinasha, and he's talking about how won't she be happy to see me, and you can tell it's not meant in good intent. You can tell that there is something just off about this man, which of course totally makes him my brand, but that's beside the point. And yeah, he definitely doesn't waste any time showing that his bite is every bit as bad as his bark, and we see him absolutely rip the dude that is with the girl and make him completely disintegrate and disappear as far as I could tell, whereas the girl only got away because the guy casted some kind of teleport on her to ensure that she would escape, while this guy was casting something that just completely obliterated him. Holy crap, dude. It wasn't even a fact of some kind of direct confrontation between the two groups. The two people were like, okay, we're gonna leave, you can do your thing, and this guy was just like, nah, you are going to get in my way, and I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. Zap! And that was the end of that. Holy crap, dude. This is somebody that I don't think that you want to just randomly be dicking around with, because he seemed to have a really bad attitude the more that we saw him. But he's definitely going to make for an interesting force of some kind of villainy or antagonism going forward for our main characters. It'll be interesting to see just what kind of history he and Tinasha actually have, because from the way that these people were all talking, it seemed to me like Tinasha is looking for this guy, and I wonder for what. Like, what kind of history do the two actually have? When she's talking to Oscar later and she says that someday he might need to use the sword to get rid of her, is there some connection between her and this guy? Can he have some kind of power over her? Can he make her do things she wouldn't want to do or something? Is that the kind of thing that might be the reason why Oscar might need to somehow take her out? Because holy crap, that would definitely be a problem. Either way, I'm definitely intrigued. He's definitely upped my interest because that's just how I roll. And we will see what happens as the story goes forward. Okay, next we have your weekly reminder that Lazar is totally freaking boring. Okay, that's out of the way, moving along. I want to talk a bit more about Oscar and what's going on with him as this story progresses, because it's really interesting to see how my perception of his character has shifted as these 3 weeks have gone down and these 3 episodes have come out. When I initially started this story, I thought Oscar was going to be kind of a badass and pretty interesting. I thought it was really cool as we watched him climb the tower, but then we find out that everything about the tower is an illusion, which means that nothing he did actually constitutes any sort of value, which was annoying. In the second week, we see that he ultimately ends up just doing as Tinasha asks, stepping out, and we miss out on seeing him actually interact with things. In this episode, we do see him actually make some attempts toward doing some stuff, and he does recognize, unlike Lazar, that the creature in the forest is obviously a problem, and he definitely doesn't fall for the idea that it's a pearl, especially given that a pearl needs to grow underwater, my guy. Like, Lazar, what were you doing? Like, that was weird. Maybe they do that in this world or something, but from my perspective, that was odd. But again, we see a situation where Oscar needs to be rescued by Tinasha, and he ends up getting himself into trouble that he did not foresee. One thing I've noticed several people missing is the fact that he was being attacked by something that utilizes poison, and while it's ultimately a spell or curse that utilized psychological damage that was causing him problems later in the episode, the fact that there was poison involved here in the earlier parts also means that what Tinasha cast on him wasn't going to grant him vulnerability to what was happening. So that was interesting in and of itself. I think it was clever of the writers to make sure to give him at least a couple things where he's still in danger so that we can still see potential growth and have potential concern for him. I think for me personally, the reason I'm not super excited about Oscar is that he is the equivalent of the romantic lead version of, like, eat your vegetables. Oscar is all of the things that you would normally want a woman to be attracted to in a man. He is confident, he is competent, he is wealthy, he is capable, etc. I mean, when I say that Oscar isn't doing anything exciting in the story, I don't mean that he is utterly incapable or anything like that. I just mean, like, the focus is far more on Tinasha, which makes sense because she's a witch and she has all the interesting powers and everything, and the things that they are fighting are often magically based, so it makes sense that her powers are going to be of more value in those circumstances. But, I mean, he's just your straight-laced hero kind of guy, and we haven't really gotten a lot of depth on him to really make him stand out or be unique as anything more than, like, he's what would happen if Beauty and the Beast was told from the point of view of Gaston. And I mean, that's okay, but it's just not something I find really interesting. At least as far as that part of the story goes. That said, I'm gonna give the man a bit of credit in this episode because one thing I did notice is when we have the whole situation where he's having these visions because he's been placed under this curse by the Witch of the Forest, he's literally dreaming about Tinasha. And what that shows us is that Oscar is interested, obviously, in continuing his family line, and he does think that's important, which makes sense for a prince who is going to eventually be the king of a kingdom and all that kind of jazz. But the fact that in his dreams, in his subconscious, that he is actively and visually choosing Tinasha in this situation, obviously he is honestly attracted to her, and he obviously wants her to be the person. It isn't merely about practicality, and I thought that was an interesting choice. And now we should do a bit of chatting about Tinasha herself, because I gave her a lot of hell last week, and she actually deserves a bit of credit this week because there's something about her that we didn't know, and that we find out this week that is super important and super useful. And it's really interesting because it isn't something we learn about her from her telling us. It's something that we learn about her as Oscar learns it about her. and that is that when he is talking with the Witch of the Forest actually explains to him that Tinasha's magic is actually based off of something called spirit magic, and that one of the most key aspects of being a spirit mage in this world is that the person must be sexually pure. And if someone actually ends up engaging in sexual activities with somebody, and they are this kind of mage, that their power decreases. Now, on a purely practical level, that could be an absolute no for someone to begin with, just because they wouldn't want to lose their power, and that might just be a conscious decision right there. But then we also have to think about the reality that what Oscar is asking Tinasha to do involves the fact that her magic is supposed to make it so that if she has his baby, she's not going to actually be in danger. But given what we've just found out, we don't actually know whether or not the effect on her would be serious enough to actually put her at some kind of risk. And I mean, even if there's only a chance of it putting her at some kind of risk, there are some women who will consciously decide not to have children because they are afraid of medical conditions or side effects or other things. So why the heck wouldn't Tinasha potentially feel that way as well? I mean, her body, her choice, damn it. At the end of the day, that is the key thing. And given what we know about this new situation, that becomes even more crucial. One of the interesting things that I noticed as these people were discussing Tinasha while she was not there is that they both seemed so confident in the idea that, well, this is all a thing, but it wouldn't affect her. And it's like, oh really? So you guys just know, do ya? I thought that was kind of lame. Another thing I kind of kicked myself for not grabbing onto last week, and that I can definitely talk about here, is the fact that Tinasha might have physical strength with a sword, and she might be powerful as a mage, but from an emotional and personal connection standpoint, she has a lot of learning and growing to do. She really doesn't seem to understand what it is to interact with people. She seems like she's much more focused on and comfortable with her familiars and dealing with things through them. And at the start of the episode, when she is trying to cut her hair, she's grabbing her hair and she's gonna use a sword and just yank it off. And then this lady comes in to ask her if she needs anything, and they end up trimming her hair instead. But she was just going to use the most practical and direct solution she could do on her own, rather than going and getting her hair properly cut. Or later on, when she and Oscar are dealing with the situation where he is under this new curse, she actually breaks the curse by having him see the person that in the dream and end up strangling them, and doesn't realize, when it turns out that it's her that he's seeing in the dream, why it would upset him, and can't seem to understand why it bothers him when he comes to, only to end up going and talking to the Witch of the Forest, who is like, well, can I have him? And for a moment, Tinasha's like, yeah, I guess. And then she's like, no. And she makes the whole excuse about the concern of mixing the witch bloodlines into the royal bloodline, which, I mean, if that was Tinasha's sole concern, why wouldn't Chicky just wait a year and then do her thing once the protection situation is over? Duh. But at the same time, we see how upset she is getting at the idea that initially she thinks Oscar has a lover, and she's like, what the hell? And it seems like she is actually getting a bit flustered, or possibly even a little jealous, which is pretty funny. I mean, it seems like we're starting to actually see some underlying emotional connection from each of these characters, and I think that's good, because to me, at least for the first couple episodes, it felt to an extent like that was missing. And without that, this really seemed kind of numb to me, and it really wasn't working and connecting. So I'm really glad to see that happening. One thing that I really liked at the end is that we actually see her come into the room and him sitting there, and then they end up apologizing to each other, and they end up hugging, and I thought that was really cute. And the thing is, it wasn't like either of them made the other feel the need to apologize, but it's that both of them recognized that in their own way they had done something that potentially hurt the other, and it was great to actually see them have some kind of awareness about that in some form of circumstance, because they've seemed kind of clueless about how the other feels about things, and they've both been flinging crap at each other without really meaning anything malicious by it, but just by being clueless. I mean, every time he's like, marry me, marry me, marry me. I mean, he hasn't realized what he's been asking of her. When he does that, he hasn't understood the full consequences of it. Now, I don't necessarily think it's going to stop him from asking it, but at least he now has the foresight to understand why she might be saying no. On her end, she actually now has some kind of awareness that it isn't merely like he wants a womb. It's actually something to do with her, and he actually has some kind of attraction toward her. And she has concrete proof of that because he's dreaming about her like, yo, that is not something somebody does by accident. That's somebody saying somebody's name in their sleep. So that's really interesting. Anyway, now that I've shared my thoughts on this, what did you guys think of this week's episode? Are you guys enjoying seeing these two get together? Did you like the Witch of the Forest? What are your thoughts on what happened with those two strangers and the guy who ripped somebody out of existence? I'd love to know, so feel free to leave a comment below. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!